doesn't matter where on the political spectrum an elected representative sits, their number one goal is always the same: protecting their own jobs. Our political class probably doesn't spend too much time dwelling on how unjust and undemocratic it is to pack as many sympathetic voters as possible into one district or another. To them, it's simple job security. But protecting one's job in what's supposed to be a representative democracy robs us of the ability to hold them accountable. The safer they become, the easier it is to ignore the public will. This shouldn't be allowed to happen. If winner take all helps the political class keep their jobs and makes our country more undemocratic, there's no reason to tolerate it. It is unacceptable. In lopsided congressional districts, the only actual competition happens in the primary. A Republican candidate, say, is more worried about being outflanked by a more zealous right-wing candidate than a moderate. That is precisely how former Republican House Majority Leader Eric Cantor got spiked from his seat, one of the most stunning surprise defeats in recent memory. This phenomenon of proving who can be more partisan helps drive the two parties even further away from one another. As a New York Times article notes, this lack of competition has consequences for how Congress operates. Some scholars and analysts say, such as the creation of an ever more polarized House, with incumbents increasingly insulated from challenges from the other party that would push them to the center. Not only do voters frequently stop voting in lopsided districts, but representatives stop even attempting to win votes. The Republicans view cities as Democratic strongholds, and Democrats view rural areas as locked up for Republicans. After the territory is ceded, something terrible starts to happen. The results are seen most easily in state legislatures. Since there's nothing to be gained for a Republican to support funding for schools or jobs programs in urban areas, the opposition's turf, there's no reason to vote for it. Likewise, Democrats realize that they have the cities locked up, so they can take their votes for granted. That means they don't really have to fight all that hard for those areas either. So urban areas, tax-rich environments that bring in lots of revenue for the state, ironically become deprived of funding. When Forrest Claypool was CEO of Chicago Public Schools, he noted how although the city had 20% of all the students in Illinois, Chicago only got 15% of state school spending. He pointed out in a speech that the state gave Chicago kids 74 cents for every dollar it spent on a child in the predominantly white remainder of Illinois in 2016. In fact, Claypool said the trend was likely to get even worse. Winner take all means cities, suburbs, and rural areas must all fight each other for a piece of the action. And there are real consequences for both winners and losers. This harsh aspect of winner-take-all creates even more gridlock after the elections. The winner-take-all logic has even spread to legislation. During Barack Obama's first term, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made a revealing statement. He said, "The single most important thing that we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president." McConnell recognized that when the Democrats are in power, working with them on their agenda reflected better on the Democrats than it did on Republicans. When laws passed, Democrats got all the credit. McConnell understood that, by the same token, if the Republicans leveraged their power to stop the Democratic Party's agenda, it would be the Democrats who would get all the blame. And so the Republican Party dug in its heels and bogged down everything it could. As predicted, the Democrats took the heat. This strategy has become commonplace now, and the American legislature is basically paralyzed. Since neither party is willing to cross no man's land and pass bipartisan legislation, possibly helping the other side according to winner-take-all logic, the only time an agenda can move forward is when the House, Senate, and presidency are all controlled by one party. Waiting for that to happen once every 10 years or so is not good enough. We have a full-time legislature that can only pass laws when conditions are just right. That is unacceptable. There are ways to change this, and eliminating winner-take-all elections would be a huge step in ending the constant gridlock. This is something that only a third party could advocate for. Changing how we elect our representatives would change our country for the better. Think about it.
One of the most harmful effects of polarization in society is that people have sort of forgotten how to disagree effectively. We are so convinced that people who have different political and ideological views than we do are somehow beyond the pale, that we've forgotten how to talk to our friends and our neighbors and even our own family members. In my research, we focus a lot more on creating conditions for constructive civil conversations and really building trust across divides rather than constantly trying to persuade each other. When two people both strongly believe whatever they believe, nobody will ever change their mind. And so all you end up with is sort of a lot of frustration and a lot of disdain for the other person because they are failing to change their mind in the face of what you think of as excellent evidence. By contrast, building trust doesn't require us to change our minds, right? I can respect you and I can trust your good intentions and I can trust the fact that you have truly experienced what you say you have experienced. And that doesn't require me to concede on anything that's important to me. So building trust has this sort of like infinite possibility where both people can benefit from it. And it doesn't require anyone to feel like they lost an argument or are somehow now inferior to the other person. When I think about what gives me hope for people finding any common ground in the current situation we're in, I think, people basically like people. We want to have friends. We want to have interesting conversations. And some of the most interesting conversations are ones where we disagree with somebody and learn something from the disagreement. And so I think we have this sort of natural pull towards connecting with other folks who are different from us. And it's a matter of getting the right skills to do it comfortably. So what I would love is for our schools, and when I say schools, I don't mean universities, I mean like middle schools and high schools, to start teaching constructive disagreement skills so that our teenagers can have really interesting, meaningful conversations together and not have those conversations escalate into conflict. And then I think we can, from that, really have a very different dynamic amongst like voting adults, 10, 20 years from now.
One of the biggest threats facing America today is our financial situation. They'll tell you that it's immigrants or drug cartels or that it's left versus right. But the bigger threat is the fact that we are $34 trillion in debt. And we have no possible way of ever paying that back. Just to put it in perspective for you, if you were to spend $1 million every single day from the time Jesus Christ was born, you still wouldn't spend $1 trillion. And America is $34 trillion in debt. And that debt is growing at a rate of about $2 trillion every 4 months. And it's only picking up speed. So the question you might be asking is, who do we owe that money to? Pretty much everybody. Half of our national debt is owed to foreign countries. Japan holds about $1 trillion in U.S. debt. China holds about $800 billion. The UK, Canada, and a bunch of other countries hold the rest. The other half of our debt is owed to Americans. But that's not even the worst part. What's worse is the interest that continues to accrue on all of the debt. We are growing our debt by about $100 billion a month just off interest alone. The interest is now one of the largest expenses in the federal budget, right alongside the military and Social Security. Every serious economist, left, right, or center, agrees on one thing. There is no mathematical way to pay this back. None. And everybody knows it. Which raises another question. If everyone knows that the U.S. can't pay off its debt, why do they keep investing in us? Why do countries like China and Japan keep lending us money? There's a few reasons for this. One is, of course, the fact that the dollar is the world's reserve currency. The world trades in dollars. Oil is purchased in dollars. Banking and international finance is measured in dollars. All of that is true. But the reason why all of that is true is because America projects dominance. America doesn't have to just be powerful. We have to look powerful. All the rhetoric about America being the greatest and most powerful country in the world isn't just simply to boost our own ego. We do that for our very survival. The world trusts the dollar because they trust American power. We have the strongest military. We have the largest economy. And we have the most liquid financial markets for now. For now, we are the ruling empire. So where else are they going to go? Who else are they going to borrow money from other than the ruling empire? But the thing is, this empire is built on a house of cards. Our financial situation is a huge vulnerability. And America has a problem right now with nations trying to expose that vulnerability. All it takes is for one card to fall for this whole structure to fall apart. One major loss of confidence, one major default on a payment, and down goes Frazier. This whole house of cards, this illusion of dominance, our status as the global empire all hinges on the belief that America cannot be challenged. And right now we are being challenged. Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine against the orders of our president is a direct threat to American dominance. And Putin is well aware of that. Putin is well aware that America is a house built out of straw, and he is huffing and he is puffing and he is trying to blow our house down. Defending Ukraine has nothing to do with defending democracy. It's about defending the dollar. If Russia is able to defy our sanctions and survive a war with Ukraine, it sends a message to the world that America is no longer untouchable, which means that our dollar is not as safe as we pretend it to be. And that is something that we cannot tolerate if we have any ambitions of remaining the global empire, which of course is our only ambition. Once trust is lost in the dollar, the entire American financial system starts to fall apart. It's just like a bank. A bank can only exist as long as people trust that they can get their money out. America can only exist as long as the world believes that we are the most powerful nation on earth. And unfortunately, the world is slowly starting to lose that trust. And once you've lost the world's trust, that is a debt that you can never repay.
If the central bank collapses in America, you need bullets. You don't need gold. Because all hell's going to break loose.
I was going to say bottled water.
Bottled water and bullets. Gold sucks as an investment. If the central bank collapses,
yes,
every business that you can name right now that you're familiar with will have gone away simultaneously. I mean, it's similar to a nuclear winter.
Right.
Okay,
right.
You're going to have a whole new government. You're going to have a whole reset of the property rights and economy. This is not like gold is going to help you in that. No, it's not. So the central bank is not going to collapse. Oh, my God. Just because one bunch of Duber venture capitalists and startup tech guys ran their little San Francisco bank into the bay does not mean the central bank is in trouble. If the central bank collapses in America, you need bullets. You don't need gold.
I am so sick of explaining how the government works in the United States. It's meant to move slow. It was not designed to be quick and effective and efficient. And I know you hate to hear that because you come from the private world where you think everything is about efficiency and shareholder value. The federal government was designed to move slow and meticulously. That's why it's almost been around for 300 years. Private businesses come and go. If Twitter goes out, somebody else will fill in its place. If the federal government goes out, there's nothing to replace it. Republicans are moving way too fast. They are changing too much too quickly. The founders never anticipated this. Never. It was designed to be meticulous and slow and checks and balances and plenty of people having to sign off on stuff. They're not doing that. They're signing off on their own stuff. And when it's supposed to be signed off, they're not waiting for a sign off. They're just moving forward and nobody can keep up with them. The problem is they are moving too fast. It was not designed for this speed.
So I know a lot of you guys are listening to MAGA and these motherfuckers out there talking about how all this tariffs and Trump's economic plan is long term, right? This is shit. We got to bring manufacturing back here. And if we make stuff here again like the old days, we can start selling it again, right? And then there's people debating exactly why and what. Here's the thing. Two things that are really important to understand, right? One, which has to do with the way we run the government. Our government was never meant to be super efficient and fast. It was intentionally designed to be slow and difficult to make change on purpose to avoid the exact bullshit that's going on right now when you have one guy wielding his fucking magic goddamn fix everything wand like he knows what he's doing and fucking things up. It needs deliberate discussion and debate, thorough review and analysis so that we know what we do is going to be good and work. And will we make mistakes along the way? Yeah, of course we will. But we're not fucking throwing everything over the edge and crossing our fingers and hoping it works. So that's one thing, right? The government is supposed to fucking be slow. And the other thing, all this shit about the economy, guys, some of the things you're saying aren't wrong, except It's generational. You know how long it would take to shift manufacturing back to the United States the way that it was? And yes, we made mistakes in the past as a whole, left and right, and we lost a lot of our manufacturing power. We shipped it abroad. Mostly that has to do because of we were feeding fat rich cat motherfuckers and not paying attention to the people. But either way, you don't do that shit overnight. And you sure as hell don't do it by just throwing up fucking tariffs randomly based on a fucking whim, which is everything Trump's doing. You want change, it takes generations, and it's done slowly, methodically, and the right way. You're right. The government was broken. But this isn't how you fucking fix it. You don't send a stupid fucking moron up there with a goddamn battle axe and ask him to just destroy everything. Because all of us are going to fucking suffer for that.
They have you fighting a culture war so you pay no attention to the class war. But what exactly is the culture war and how is it used to distract us from the class war? And before I begin, I just want to mention that because of the nature of this topic, it might trigger some old, deep wounds for some people. And I just want to throw it out there that the intention behind this video is to help heal wounds and to help create unity. It is not here to sow hatred and division. That is the exact opposite of my intentions. So you may not agree with my assessment, but I hope that you can understand that my intention behind this video is to help unite and not divide. And I hope that you can have an open mind and an open heart while watching this. All right, so to explain this video, I'm going to be using a set of hierarchies, all right? And I'm going to start with the class war or the economic hierarchy under capitalism. And to represent my hierarchy, I have a pyramid, all right? And if you are on the higher end of the pyramid, you have an advantage in this system, or some people will see that as being superior or better than. And if you're on the lower end of the hierarchy, that is where you have a disadvantage and you are seen as inferior or lesser than by some others, okay? And under capitalism, there are two major classes of people. The class that has the advantage under capitalism is the capital owning class or capitalists, people who build their wealth through owning assets. And the people on the bottom half of the pyramid are working class people who are people who build their wealth through their own personal labor. I have multiple videos explaining how these two classes interact with one another, but in a nutshell, this class builds their wealth off of exploitation of this class in a parasitic relationship, okay? And you can go watch those videos if you want a more in-depth explanation. But for now, we're going to leave it at this with this hierarchy here in the class war. And within the working class itself, there are also hierarchies as well. And I'm just going to give a very simple example to help you understand, again, the advantage versus disadvantage, because many people can see or have experienced this particular advantage and disadvantage. You have at the lower end of the hierarchy, you have lower wage workers, so people who don't get paid as much. And then higher up, you have higher wage workers, right? Or what people usually refer to as poor versus, and then you're rich, okay? Now, you might be wondering, why do I never hear about this particular war? Because it's by design, okay? If the majority of working class people knew the relationship between these two classes, this class would cease to exist, and there goes all their money and wealth and power that they have extracted from us if we banded together, because we are the ones who truly have all of the power. We just don't know it. All right. So they want to make sure that they conceal this war as much as they can. And a good way they do that is by having you focus on the culture war. All right, and now for the culture war, or the different social hierarchies that exist. And I want to be very clear here that these social hierarchies are not the result of one individual. It isn't your fault, okay? You simply have inherited a world that has been built before you. However, that being said, because you are surrounded by a world that you have not built, you may have internalized some of these hierarchies, okay? And how you combat against these hierarchies is being brave and looking inwards and seeing what ideas you may have internalized and facing them, and that is the way you heal from these hierarchies. All right, so to save time, I have set up the hierarchies here, and you might not agree with all of the hierarchies here. And again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying that if you will find yourself on the higher part of the hierarchy, I'm not saying that it's your fault. I'm not saying that you're a bad person, and I'm not saying that you personally believe that you are superior than the person below you on the hierarchy. What I'm saying is that your nervous system might have internalized this idea because societally, this is how things are set up right now. And even though this is how things are set up, in my lifetime personally, I have seen great progress and strides in making things, closing these gaps and bridges, right? And the idea, or at least what I want in the world, is where one is not seen as superior or inferior, right? We can celebrate our differences without thinking that we are superior to the person that is different than us. Okay. And I have seen many people work towards that world with me. Okay. However, when we heal from these particular hierarchies, as we heal from them, what happens is we have unity. We become more accepting of our differences. Okay. And we're not fighting each other. And when that happens, there's an issue for this war, because now this war is out in the open, and people, when they're not focusing all their time, effort, and energy in fighting for their rights here, like if you're a queer person and fighting for gay rights, or if you're a woman fighting for women's rights, or you are a person of color fighting for your rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then we can turn our attention to, like, wait a second, why are there still a lot of poor people, right? Like what is happening? Why is the wealth gap so huge? We turn our focus here, right? And that's the last thing that this class wants. Okay. So anytime more and more unity comes from the working class, this is when they will use their stolen wealth and power to use the media that they own to go ahead and start causing division in any one of these groups. Okay. And most recently in the political world, what's a group that they have been targeting? In the narrative, the political world has focused a lot on cis people versus trans people. Before 2015, you never heard about trans people in politics, right? Ever. Trans people have existed for thousands of years. But for now, in the political world, there's so much attention and hatred on trans people. Because why? Well, because trans people are a very, very small minority, and they have very limited amounts of power. They are very marginalized. They are an easy target. They're an easy target to get us to focus and start fighting each other about this, of people who support or don't support, yada, yada, yada. So you're focusing on this more and all your time, effort, and energy, and now you're distracted again from this. And I'd like to end with, what can you do to help? And the first thing that you can do to help is ask yourself the very tough and very real question of, how might I have internalized some of these hierarchies? Okay. And I'm not saying that it's a bad person, that you're a bad person if you have. I'm saying that you might have internalized some of these ideas because of the society you have grown up in, okay? And the way that you fight against that is by bringing it into the light. And the only way you're going to bring it into the light is if you ask yourself and self-reflect. And the other thing that you can do is that if you're on the higher end of the hierarchy for any of these groups, you can seek out the people that are on the other end of the hierarchy and help them feel seen, heard, and validated, okay? You want to listen to their stories and help spread their stories, because and believe them when they tell you something is unfair, when they aren't treated the same or they're not treated with respect, right? The best thing you can do is just listen to them and help them feel heard and help spread awareness and of their stories. And finally, the last thing you can do to help is make noise about this war. Understand how the relationship between these two classes, and start talking about it, okay? Make noise, because the media can only ignore it for so long, okay? Put this into the light, okay? Because I firmly believe too that social liberation will not truly ever be achieved without economic liberation, and economic liberation will bring about social liberation.
If the people ever realized they had more in common than they'd been told, they'd be unstoppable. So those in power had a strategy. Don't let them come together. Don't let them see each other as neighbors. Make them enemies. Divide them by skin color, by birthplace, by paperwork, by religion, by fear. Tell the poor white farmer that the black sharecropper is the problem. Tell the factory worker that the migrant is stealing his job. Tell the citizen that the asylum seeker is dangerous. And it works, as long as no one asks questions. Because here's the truth. Your enemy is never the one with less than you. It's the one convincing you to fight your neighbor while they take more for themselves. And this didn't start this year. It didn't start with a tweet or a campaign slogan. It's one of the oldest tricks in the American book. Back in 1676, poor white colonists and both free and enslaved Africans teamed up in what's now called Bacon's Rebellion. They were sick of being used, tired of the governor and the wealthy elite hoarding land and power, so they rose up together. And that terrified the people in charge. So after the rebellion ended, they rewrote the rules. They divided the poor by race. They gave poor white men a little bit of power, land rights, voting rights, status, but only if they agreed to see black people as beneath them. And it worked. Poor whites stopped organizing across color lines, and a system of race-based division took root. Not because it was true, but because it was useful. You see the same tactic after slavery ends. During Reconstruction, there's a glimpse, just a glimpse, of black political power. Men who had been enslaved now voting, owning land, even holding office. And instead of expanding the vision to include everyone, those in power split the country again. Black codes, Jim Crow, lynchings, literacy tests, propaganda in the press, and always the same message. You are losing your country because of them. Fast forward to the 1900s, immigrants flood in from Italy, Ireland, China, Mexico, and once again, the people in power were whispering, they're dirty, they're criminals, they're taking what's yours. Instead of unity among workers fighting for fair wages and safety, they fought each other. Instead of standing up to corporations and factory owners, they blamed their neighbor for speaking a different language. You see it again in the 1980s, the war on drugs. Communities of color devastated, labeled as violent, dangerous, other. While wealthier, whiter suburbs were told to be afraid, not of the drugs, but of the people. And today, we see it every time someone tells you to be afraid of them, but they can't name who they are, can't tell you a single story, can't show you the threat. Just fear and silence and division. But here's the truth they hope we never figure out. We were never meant to fight each other. We were meant to fight for each other. Our power is in solidarity, in neighborliness, in not taking the bait. Because if we ever stop long enough to see each other clearly, to tell the real stories, to name the real villains, we'll remember who the country actually belongs to. It's not about left and right. It's not about race or language or papers. It's about people versus power that doesn't want to be held accountable. And once you see the trick, you never fall for it again.
How did the American dream die? How did the middle class die? I'm going to tell you, it started in the 1980s with trickle-down economics that did not work. They decided to give tax cuts to the rich and corporations saying that money would trickle down. It didn't. It just made the rich richer. Then we greenlit stock buyback. So instead of, when the productivity was going up, instead of giving workers more money, they just bought back their stocks so that the shareholders could make profit and the executives could get bonuses. Then we had leverage buyouts, and the government didn't regulate leverage buyouts, and that was the start of private equity basically buying up everything so that they could make more money. Then we moved away from pensions to 401ks, which essentially just took the responsibility and accountability of the company to take care of their workers with the retirement and put it on to individuals, but we were never taught economics in high school, so how the fuck are we supposed to know about compound interest and investing? But they said the 401k was better than the pension when it wasn't. Then they started shipping our jobs overseas, building the middle class of other countries so that they could make more profit, destroying the middle class here. Then we started ramping up the borrowing money and getting into debt as a country, which devalues our dollar. And then in 2008, we had predatory lending, which crashed the housing market, fucked over so many Americans. And then we used taxpayer money to bail out the banks. And when all the houses were cheap, the rich went and bought those up. And that's when you started to see the rent start to increase around the 2010s into the 2015s. And then in 2011, we allowed super PACs to exist. So billionaires can now buy elections, and they use that money on attack ads, which divides the country. Divide and conquer, and that's what they did. In 2020, we had the pandemic, which both sides of the aisle handled like absolute shit, shut down all small businesses, all the money went to the top, the rich got richer, they printed trillions of dollars more, which people needed, but what did all the people do? We spent the money because we needed to spend the money, and where did that money go? To the top, and they got richer. And lastly, they decided during the pandemic, let's lower the interest rates on buying a home to 2.5% to 3% so that people could refinance and get ahead. But no, all that really did was give the green light to a bunch of rich people to basically borrow free money and buy up all the fucking housing so that we can no longer own a home. And that all ended in 2021. Then we've experienced 25% inflation since the pandemic. And here we are in 2025, and we no longer have a middle class, and the American dream is dead.
I was talking about how the American middle class really started to shrink once the civil rights movement was passed and white people stopped supporting social programs because black people had access to them. And I get a lot of comments like this wondering exactly what went away, so I wanted to go into that a little bit. For starters, it's important to know that the idea most people have of American culture today didn't exist for the first half of the 20th century, and the United States government actually spent a lot of money on a process called Americanization, where they built exclusive white neighborhoods so that white people could feel a sense of national pride about the good schools, parks, and pools inside of them. During this time, most states also created a system of public universities and colleges that had free or reduced tuition, so students only had to pay for their housing and books. And of course, these programs were extremely popular with the new white middle class until civil rights started to make major progress in the 1950s and 60s, at which point you see support for public goods start to disappear. In her book, The Sum of Us, the author Rachel McGee describes this concept as drain pool politics, because in the center of a lot of these communities was a massive glimmering pool that stood as a testament to what the American government could do for its people. And rather than integrate when the government said that segregation was no longer legal, a lot of these communities chose to fill their pools with bleach, acid, or just drain them and top them off with concrete so that they didn't have to share with black people. And this shows perfectly on the personal or even community scale how white people have historically shot themselves in the foot to stop other people from taking advantage of benefits they already have, but it happens on the nationwide level too, which is why the Republican dog whistle about the welfare queen myth has been so popular and why a white majority hasn't voted for a Democratic candidate for president in decades. And a lot of the blame gets laid at the feet of individuals like Reagan and Nixon, but it's important to remember that Republican policies are popular with white voters, and Heather McGee sums it up really well when she says that public goods are only popular when the public is viewed as good. So as soon as black people got a seat at the table, white support for public programs really started to dip, and we've been on that trajectory ever since.
I'm a chronic article reader, and there's this article that came out in the New York Times today about Disney and the decline of the American middle class. And if you have the Times app, you have to go read that article. This is it. I read it this morning and I have to talk about it because I think this article is a forerunner for what we're seeing in a lot of American culture, not just the decline of the middle class, but how a majority of things that are being created now, by things, I mean things in hospitality, especially in the leisure world, right, are being marketed towards the rich, towards the top 20% of American society. And they're kind of just forgetting about the middle class. And that's why in our current world, unless you can pay for upgrades for something, nothing is enjoyable anymore, right? Think about, like, in Disney is an amusement park, as we all know. And Disney used to have this idea, this whole ethos of everyone's a VIP. And when Disney was founded and when it was run for the first couple decades, that was the mindset, right? People from all over are going to come to Disney, but it doesn't matter where they come from or how much money they're spending. Everyone gets the same Disney experience. Everyone waits in line. Everyone does all these things. And how at first Disney was very, very hesitant to kind of introduce things like Fast Pass and those upgrade type programs because they really wanted to stick to this ethos. But this article points out a crazy statistic. And that's this point right here, right? How in 1992, there were 88,000 households worth 20 million or more. But by 2022, there were 644,000. In the same way that people are falling out of the middle class to the lower working class, the same thing is happening at a smaller number rate to the top 20%, right? It's also increasing massively. And a lot of leisure companies have realized there's no point of tailoring to a declining middle class that's on a budget. They can tailor to the upper class that in theory don't really have a tight budget to adhere to. Those numbers don't really mean much. They're willing to spend a couple thousand more to get a better experience because they have it to spend. And this article follows two families who went to Disney, a traditional American middle-class family and a tech executive family who went. And just the difference in their experiences based off the upgrades they're able to buy and afford, and wow. And I feel like we're starting to see this with everything, though, especially in the vacation world. There is nothing left in the middle anymore. Your options are either a Motel 6 or a Marriott Marquis or like a really nice hotel, right? There's no in between anymore. And how normally the cheapest option that's available to you in America, that's on flights, on buses, especially in transport and hotels, really comes with nothing. Think about flights, right? The cheap economy flights, I find, this is not a critique at all, but they don't really come with anything. You don't get any food, you don't get any water, your luggage, you're not guaranteed a checked bag. You have to get so many upgrades to make the experience actually comfortable for you. And it's because the middle class declines and these upper classes, I guess, grow and their wealth explodes. It's not just necessarily the growth in numbers, right? It's the amount of wealth that the top 20% now have. I read an article talking about how Mark Zuckerberg has more wealth than like most of his entire generation combined. Like if you take all millennials and add up all their money, Mark Zuckerberg might be richer than all of them combined. Like that kind of disparity, they're better off targeting these people who have no budgets, right? And here's the thing, I used to work in nightlife and I low-key saw this. I was a bottle girl, right? The club I worked was very, very exclusive, but it was very small. My club had like 15 tables, and that's really kind of pushing it. But it's because we were 1K when you walk through the door, 1K table mints. Sometimes we would make more on bottle service than the entire bar would make off everyone who came in. Not just my club, it's very, very common. If you go to some of these clubs in New York and LA and Miami, DC, the bottle service alone can make more than the entire bar makes in a night. And that can be even in a pretty small in a pretty big venue. You can have 1,000 people come in and buy a $20 drink and then have one client come in and spend $20K on 4 bottles. And it's very possible. That one person is giving you more money than those 20 people all combined. And $20K is not a big number by any means for New York, LA, or Miami bottle sales, by any means. I've heard numbers that would be ridiculous for bottle service. And sometimes it's one person putting out all that money. So as the club, we've learned to tailor to those individuals. Because that guy coming in to spend $9K, that $9K is more than 15 people buying just to get you. And that's the thing about the world we're living in. What happens when there's no longer anywhere for the middle class to go?